Hi, you're watching a very specially recorded session of AWANI right here. This is the Media Village. If you don't know, Media Village sits beside the Congress, two main centers for the World Economic Forum. And before I cannot come in, but this year, for the first time, Astro AWANI is accredited. And I think with the only Malaysian media here, I tried to find my counterparts from Southeast Asia. I did not find them. But what I found is I have access to great people. My bosses would like me to go for the Jack Ma's of the world, but I would like to find people like the outstanding individuals sitting right in front of me. Tom Zaki, did I say that right?
You did, you did. Well done.
Sounds more like Malaysian name, Zaki, Arabic name. But the story is, and I want to start at this juncture with this simple analogy. Most parents in Malaysia right now want their kids to do well in the final exam of high school because they need to get good grades to go into a good university. And because of the Anglo-Saxon connection, most parents in Malaysia would want them to go Harvard, Cambridge, or Oxford. Maybe Imperial College down the line, or maybe UCLA. But Tom Zaki went to Princeton and he didn't finish. Did I get that right?
That's right. I left after a year and a half.
And why? Because he wants to save the earth by turning waste into literally gold in terms of business. And it was just poop.
That's right. That's how it began.
I'm going to let you tell the story now.
Well, so, you know, I'm originally from Budapest, is where I was born. Okay. And Budapest was communist when I was born there because it was controlled by the Russians. And when Chernobyl happened, the borders collapsed, so my parents and I, well, really my parents, I was 4, we left. We hid, and as refugees went to Germany, then as refugees to Holland, and then finally landed as refugees in Canada. And I spent 13, 14 years in Canada, and then as you said, you know, came to Princeton. That's how I ended up in the United States. Especially now with the election, I'm proudly telling everyone I'm not American. I don't have an American passport. And 4 years later, let's hope I will not have to say that anymore. But needless to say, I was going to school, and I've always, you know, in moving from communism to the center of capitalism, which is either the US or China, but back then it was the US for sure, I love the concept of business because business is, I think, the most powerful way to change the world. It's more powerful than war. I think it's more powerful than laws because it's global and fast. Now the question is, will it change it for good or will it change it for bad?
Yes.
And business can do both. You know, the tobacco companies, the arms companies, that's maybe not so good. But there's other things that have done tremendous good. Now, what has always been a question for me is when you go to business school. I never went to business school, but I lecture. I actually teach at Harvard and Wharton a little bit, which is sort of nice because I haven't even graduated college. I think I'm the most unqualified teacher. But what's interesting is when you ask students, what's the purpose of business? They say, profit to shareholders. And that really bothered me. We were learning about it in school, and I think that people go to work and participate in commerce, not for profit to a few people, but because what does the company make, what does the company do, what's the whole point? And I was really interested in social business. And in Canada, I mean, I'll tell you the honest story. In Canada, my friends, as we all got into the schools we wanted to get into, we started growing pot in one of my friends' basements. You know, and Canada's more relaxed about this than the U.S., so it stayed in my friend's room in Montreal. But as 19-year-old guys, we don't know how to garden, and definitely don't know how to grow plants inside in a cold city in the basement. One day, a year or half a year later, my friend calls me. We're now half a year in school, and he says, I've gotten the plants to work incredibly well. So immediately, I get in my car, I drive up to Montreal, 8 hours from New Jersey. And I walk into the basement, and it's amazing. And we had a wonderful night. And then I asked him finally, how did you do it? How did you make these plants work? And he goes, I took organic waste, I fed it to worms, I took the worm poop, and that's what the plants are living from. Now, he didn't invent anything. I mean, this is how nature works. If anyone gardens, they know worm poop is the wonderful fertilizer. There's nothing unique here. But I started thinking about garbage. And I became very fascinated with garbage because I was studying economics. And you know, in economics, every time you think about a material, you think about supply and demand. And the more supply, the cheaper the price. The more demand, the higher the price. But if you think about garbage, it's a very unique material from an economic point of view because there's hyper supply, but negative demand. One way to define garbage is something that people are willing to pay to get rid of.
Yeah.
And what a raw material that is. It has negative raw material costs. So it was very fascinating. And I started TerraCycle effectively by making a worm poop company. We began in my dormitory. So my friends in my dormitory didn't like this because literally, like, my room was filled with organic garbage from the cafeteria being fed to worms. And it was imperfect, so there was flies and everything. But we got better, and we started building the company. Now, one of the challenges in being, at that time 20 years old and starting a company that is not an internet company is no one wants to finance you. Even in the US, it was impossible to get financing. So since we couldn't afford financing, we were looking at, well, can we package and start selling our product in garbage? So we became the first company in the world to take used soda bottles and directly fill them with worm poop and make a product that was made from garbage and packaged in garbage as a fertilizer. And I've always liked the idea of scale. It's what I like about the World Economic Forum. Everything here is about scale. Yes. And so we started calling retailers, and the first purchase order I ever got was from Walmart, which is the world's biggest retailer. By the way, I had no factory. It was me and my friend in a dorm room. We pretended we had a factory. So we come home one day and we have to make 250,000 bottles. So we started literally getting all our friends together and going through all the people's recycling bins in the Princeton area, taking out used soda bottles, which is where I learned a major lesson in garbage. It's illegal to go through people's garbage. I reflected on this after spending a night in jail, learning this lesson. Best flexible packaging to make your bag. And so we completely changed our business model and said, no, we're going to stop focusing on being a fertilizer company. We're going to focus on being a garbage company and make the hero the garbage, instead of make the hero of the business question the product. So the way TerraCycle's business has evolved is what we now do is we look at any type of garbage that cannot be recycled today. So, in Malaysia, there's some form of recycling, I imagine, for aluminum cans, paper, maybe glass, maybe some plastics. But probably 80% of the goods in the world, even here in Switzerland, cannot be recycled. Cigarette butts, chewing gum, pens, toothbrushes, cosmetics, shoes, plastic gloves, eyeglasses. I could go on. But if we look at this room where we are today, the only recyclable object is the paper you're holding, if you remove the metal on it. But everything else, from this table, to my shoes, to your pen, to your glasses, to the clothing I'm wearing, to this entire backdrop, will be garbage one day, but has no choice but to be thrown out. And when we had to really think about why is that the case? And the reason is that what is recycled by governments and businesses today are things that are profitable to recycle. Why does every country in the world recycle aluminum? Because aluminum is valuable. And after collecting it and processing it, you still make money. But the pen you're holding can be recycled. We're the biggest pen recycler in the world. We do it here in Switzerland in 10 countries. But it costs more to collect and process that pen than it's worth. So what we do is we create business models where we figure out how do we collect it, how do we process it, and then how do we get stakeholders, companies, retailers, cities, and so on, to pay for it. And since then, TerraCycle has grown to be a global company in 23 countries, recycling things that no one in the world thought could be recycled before.
I've interviewed many people, but right here in Davos, when it happened, it's even more meaningful to me, and what is meaningful to you as the audience is that I get great people to talk about purpose. Right here in Davos, people will be asking about what's the world of business and global trade going to be like in 2017? Trump is in there, Xi Jinping sit there. But you just talk about purpose, and I think you're more Asian than some Asians are. So please continue.
So I think, as we were chatting in the break, one of the key challenges in business is the traditional paradigm, say my parents' paradigm, is when you're young, you choose either you make money, and you may not be doing good things, you make people fat, unhealthy, drive war, or you work at an NGO, make no money, and do good things. And the big CEOs, what do? Like George Soros, even Bill Gates, they make tremendous money, and then once they've done that, and some have done it maybe with negative purpose, then they become philanthropists and give it away. I think that's a very broken idea. What I really think about is why cannot we combine these two ideas? Why can't we create social enterprises that are not NGOs, for-profits? I'm a for-profit. I make profit. That's very important. I think profit is critical, but profit is not the reason of existence. I think profit is similar to how much fat you have on your body. You need fat greater than 0% or you will die. You have to eat and you have to have some fat, but you can also have too much. Today we live in an epidemic of obesity, physical obesity, everywhere, not just America. I mean, everywhere. And that's the point. So we don't live to eat, we live to experience life.
Yes.
And I think this is the same metaphor that needs to come to businesses. Now, here's the challenge. Usually businesses think social enterprises, you are sacrificing the ability to make money, you are sacrificing the ability to scale, and you're sacrificing the ability to raise funding, go public, and so on. I'm here to tell you that if you do it right, you actually don't sacrifice any of those things, and in fact reinforce them. So let me give you some examples. First, we are a for-profit business. It's critically important. We will be public probably in 3-4 years. Okay. We have had straight revenue growth every year for 15 years. Okay. All these things that a normal business wants to see. But by trying to focus on only things that help society and the environment, and those our number one goal is the environment, how to recycle things that can't be recycled, that's our primary purpose, and our secondary is how to help society and create donations through doing this. We've given away about $25 million so far in donations to people for collecting garbage. By having purpose, one of the amazing things, just put on your profit-only hat for a minute, it creates the ability to do things better. It creates so much value you don't see. So for example, because we have great purpose, I have people begging to work for me for free. Every office around the world, 23 offices, every year we have at any point in time about 200 volunteers volunteering at the company. If you were a normal company, would people beg to work for free? No way. Yes. It's not just that people are really excited to join and volunteer. The quality, the talent we get is way higher than what we could pay for. Now, we pay decent salaries, but my CFO used to be the CFO of P&G Latin America, and he used to make 7 times the salary than I pay him. Our legal counsel, same. All of our key positions, our head of R&D used to be at DuPont for 25 years, making way more money than they could ever make at TerraCycle. And if you ask these people, these really sophisticated business people, why are they here? They say, because it makes me smile every day I go in the office. And that is very important. They make enough to sustain their lifestyle, but that's way more important to them than just the sheer amount of money. Because here's the point. We spend most of our lives working. Yes. Either for the first few years, we're free. Until from 0 to maybe 5, we're free. It's the most free time in life. Then we're studying so we can work, and then we work until basically we retire. And then we have a few more years to go, and that's it. So we spend most of our life in our jobs. And I don't think most people are happy with their jobs. Yes. And
they look forward to the weekend.
Yeah, and that's crazy. Yeah. That's totally crazy that you work for the weekends. You just defined the American perspective. And what is critical is if you create an environment filled with purpose, then people will be smiling. They will be much more innovative, much more productive. You will get way more talent. Your costs will go down. Here's another tactical example. I'll give you some very concrete examples of purpose. Every office in the world we have is in an inner city. So in the US, we don't locate in New York City. We locate in Trenton, New Jersey, which is 1 hour from New York. People, some of our employees live in New York and commute to Trenton, but Trenton is the 3rd most dangerous city in America. When I bought a house in Trenton, I one day came home to 12 bullet holes in my window. I ended up selling my house at that point. But what's amazing about locating in a city like this? Well, first, the rent is super cheap. Let's put on our capitalist hat. I pay almost nothing for rent. But beyond that, I have politicians coming into my office all the time to showcase purposeful business. My neighbors who do unpurposeful business have never had a politician visit. They don't have news cameras coming through. It creates so much value and economic value. I'll give you another example. Graffiti, spray painting on walls, that's usually seen as a negative, a social negative. The cities will pay to get rid of it and then spend money to put the person who's graffitiing in jail. And I don't think it's wise to vandalize. I think that's a bad idea. But there's an idea of urban art. So what do we do in our headquarters, which is a relatively large building? We open it up to graffiti artists. And it's become so big. If you just Google TerraCycle and graffiti, you can see this, that every wall of our building is brand new every Monday. I don't pay anything for it. I get thanked for it. I don't supply anything. They buy the paint and everything. But my employees come in, and every day they're walking around seeing what's new on the Monday, and they are smiling, and they love it, you know. It's because of all this together. It's why TerraCycle has its own TV show that it's in its 4th season, because, you know, it shows something completely different. And the key message is this, bottom line, is that purpose is not a sacrifice.
Okay.
I think people think it is. Oh, I need to invest in sustainability. I need to be more good. If you really embrace it in the core, it becomes an amazingly big asset that allows you to do things you could never, ever do before. And not to mention access to people like crazy. You know, I'm with major CEOs here at the World Economic Forum, people like Paul Polman and David Taylor, people who run Unilever and P&G. These guys, you know, communicate with me all the time, and I'm one of their smallest vendors by dollars. There's so much value there. I can't underline it, and it's not a sacrifice. That's the key.
You are still watching a very special recorded session of Again AWANI right here in Davos, and people always, you know, trash Davos. The talk on the street is just for the elites, giving simple solutions to complex problems that they don't even really understand. But here is Tom Zaki, and without Davos, I wouldn't have met him. I'm so thankful. I just passed by, eavesdrop a little of this passionate plea that he was making to another person that I don't even know. I just, can I know you? Can I bring you to the studio? And he said yes. So long story short, scale of a good purpose is there. We've discussed it. But we want this yesterday.
Yes.
Some of the turtle species are not even there for my kids to see them.
No.
So I know businesses would look at this from the profit point of view, and it makes sense for them to do this. But there are other stakeholders, and you have to talk to them anyway.
Yes.
How can the others open up their eyes and leverage higher?
It's a very interesting question. I'm going to answer it from 2 points of view. So first, the stakeholders we work with are, you know, obviously big private business, big consumer product companies, big retailers, factories, and then even small business. Private institutions are great to work with. Any social or purposeful cause should try to work with these organizations because they create scale quickly. Yes. But there's a massive area, which is the government, cities, federal, and so on. We also do work a lot with cities, 50 major cities, including Davos, although this is a tiny little town, but 50 major cities like Melbourne, Sydney, Tokyo, all the way to Los Angeles and many others run citywide cigarette recycling with TerraCycle. And we use the same logic in working with government as we go with private institutions, which is how can we make you win on your normal goals, like tourism, by solving garbage. For example, there's a direct connection with how many cigarettes are on the ground and tourism rates. So if we can show that we can collect and recycle cigarettes and reduce litter substantially, tourism goes up, and that's what pays the bill. Now the challenge with government, to be fair, is it's very slow. And it's a process to go through. But it's critical to engage them as well because they are also an absolutely important stakeholder. But I want to go from the other point of view, which is we talk a lot here, and our conversation has been around, you know, what can organizations, governments, for private, public, all this jazz, and even the World Economic Forum. The buzzwords here are like private-public partnerships, multi-stakeholder collaborations, you know, this sort of stuff, and it's valuable. But you know who's always forgotten is the individual.
Yes.
And what I believe is the individual has much, 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 much more power than they give themselves credit for, or we give them credit for as business people. One of the amazing things about the individual, especially as it pertains to private businesses, but also government, is that they are significantly more powerful than they think. Because, you know, we get all crazy about an election every 4 years, right? And what do we vote? We vote once every 4 years with a pen and a piece of paper. But we vote every day, multiple times, with actual money against what we buy. And you know what? I was meeting with the CEO of a major chocolate company. They also make gum and other things. And I was asking him for one of the books I was writing, if everyone stopped buying gum, how long would it take for the idea of gum to disappear as a concept in the world? Every gum company to go bankrupt, and there never to be the idea of chewing gum. He said 6 weeks. 6 weeks. If we stopped buying one category of product. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, it could be, and think about some, you know, could be fur. I mean, look at how much, here in Davos, you know what bothers me here? Like I see, and I understand it's cold, but how many people are wearing fur up and down the street? How many animals died for what is walking up and down the street? And there's perfect alternatives, even better ones, frankly, you know, like nice synthetics and so on. Yeah, totally. If we all stop buying fur, in 6 weeks, the concept of fur, the whole industry would be over. It would take a lot longer to do that from a political point of view. First, we have to wait for the next election. And when you vote, you're voting, in America, you vote A or B. And there's not, you know, there is difference, but you don't have more choices. And even the choices may not be really reflecting what you want. You know, people in the, across the world are suffering from obesity. It's one of the biggest epidemics right now. It's not just, everyone thinks it's an American problem. No. It is not. It's the fattest people in the world are actually now in places like New Zealand. But we vote for these products that give us obesity every day by shopping for them. Another example, a partner of ours, Coca-Cola, when, you know, one of my friends who runs a company called Honest Tea, which is the largest organic iced tea company in the US, sold his company to Coca-Cola. And I was having a dinner with him in Washington, and he said, you know what's amazing? This past quarter, this was like a few quarters ago, the entire sugary carbonated beverage business for Coke decreased. And the only area of Coke's business that went up was the natural beverages, where his company now belongs. And you know what he said? He said, you know what they're doing? They're not thinking about how to reverse the trend of the sugary beverage and try to get it to go back up. They said, how do we buy more natural beverage companies? That's the power of the consumer vote. And consumers are, I would say, almost criminally ignorant of this. And are voting for things that shouldn't exist. And if we just change our vote, everything will change incredibly fast, because the purpose of business is not to convince you to buy something you don't want. That's exceptionally difficult. I mean, almost impossible. They may convince you to buy something you never knew you wanted, but now that you see it, you want it. That's something. That's innovation. But really what they're in the business of is finding out what you want and getting it to you cheaply, quickly, and easily. So if you change your wants, the business will change, because business is a reflection of our desires. And consumers love to point the finger and say, oh, it's big companies that are ruining the world. It's big retailers that are ruining the world. Then stop voting for them. And everything will change, and it will change ridiculously fast. And we can't just rely on the discussions that happen here and say, let's wait for good things to happen. As individuals, no matter where you are in the world, your vote is the most powerful thing you have when you're voting with your spending money.
I guess it's the way you see things. I need to close, but I just want to add one last thing. Sometimes in Davos we talk about so many things, but we're talking about the after effect of something. It's like you're talking about changing the color of the car or adding a spoiler to the rear bag, but garbage is a product of consumption. And a lot of people are rethinking, why do we consume so much? For example, we're recycling packaging of cartons, but do we need it in the first place? So would you be moving all the way back to that particular basics? Because maybe I don't need to produce it this way. I can produce it another way, use all this fancy stuff being discussed, post-industrial revolution or otherwise, and instead of producing 5 million bottles, I could actually ask them to share, and I could only produce 1 million bottles. So would you be going back down that road?
Yes, it's amazing you say that. It's a wonderful point to conclude on, which is, first, the answer to garbage is nothing we talked about today. The simple answer is one thing: stop buying. That's the answer. And you know what's amazing about that answer? Is it's also the answer to every environmental problem in the world. You don't have to be an expert in the environmental problems, but every single environmental problem, air quality, water quality, deforestation, global warming, garbage, and I could list 100 more, have one source: consumerism. That's it. Isn't it? It's so easy, right? And that's in the consumer's hand. Don't buy. Now, people will say, well, but come on, I have to have clothes, I have to have a home, I have to feed myself. So, okay, so how do you do that within reality? You move from buying disposable objects, cheap disposable objects, to keep buying them over and over, to quality, durable objects that last for a very long time and live for ideally a smaller lifestyle. I've been wearing this exact pair of jeans for the past 1.5 years. Okay? And I could afford as many jeans as I want. And I have, that's it, period. And so it can happen. Now, what we're trying to do at our company is we hope one day we will be irrelevant. I don't want to last forever. I hope one day we will be irrelevant because there will not be garbage and we will not be needed. So we're anticipating this by building models, which will be launching in 2018. We're developing them now, which are models for disposable products, which will be hyper-durable, refillable, subscription-based. So you get the idea of shampoo without a disposable experience.
I wish we had like 3 more hours, but that's all the time we have. Consumption is very key, and we have to make do. But I promise you, the red carpet is for you to straight into the studio, and I will just put you live on air whenever next you'll be in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you so much, Tom Zaki. This has not been an interview. This has been a talk about purpose and a chit-chat about how to save the world. Thank you so much. And this is the kind of things you get at World Economic Forum if you listen to the media like Astro AWANI and not the big favorites of yours. It's about your choice. Like what Tom said, if you choose not to buy and you choose what to buy, you could influence greatly. And you have already helped to solve the turtle problem. We only have less than 300 tigers in our forest, and you're going to help save that too. So we're going to keep on in touch with him. And TerraCycle, go Google it, because the next time I'm having this discussion live in the studio in KL, I'm not going to go down to basic. I'm going to go to the next step, and we're going to go to Mars with the discussion. Thank you. Good night. Goodbye. Thanks to the World Economic Forum for giving us a chance this year to be in. This is the recording at the Media Village. The Congress is just there, but we're the small weight, but we're pulling big weights with our discussion. Good night and goodbye.